He found a forgotten letter behind an old fridge, written in crayon by a little girl to a father who vanished. She never got a reply. He never knew she wrote it. 20 years later, Keanu Reeves holds the letter in his hands, and what happens next will break your heart. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. It was the kind of town you pass through on a long drive without ever learning its name. The air smelled like sea salt and sun-warmed pavement. Keanu had arrived 2 days earlier for a quiet outreach event organized by the foundation. A youth shelter near the harbor had reached out for help with equipment, and Keanu, true to form, said yes without hesitation. The morning after the event, with a rare free hour before heading back to Los Angeles, he wandered into a small thrift store tucked between a diner and a laundromat. The bell above the door jingled, and the scent of old books and pine cleaner met him as he stepped inside. The place was quiet, just a woman behind the counter reading a paperback and a radio playing soft jazz in the background. Keanu gave a polite nod and began browsing. He wasn't looking for anything in particular: old cameras, postcards, dusty lamps. But as he turned down an aisle marked toys and instruments, something caught his eye. Tucked behind a stack of faded board games and a broken xylophone was a small, beat-up violin case. It was barely visible, like it had been forgotten or pushed out of sight. Keanu hesitated. The case was child-sized, with worn leather corners and faded stickers peeling from its surface. One sticker looked like a cartoon sun. Another was a blue treble clef, barely holding on. He pulled it gently from the shelf. The latches clicked open with a soft pop, and inside lay a violin no larger than his forearm. The strings were broken, the bridge slightly warped, and the bow sat crooked beneath a pile of yellowing rosin dust. But even in its state, the instrument had a kind of dignity, like it had been played with love. Keanu traced a finger along the neck. There were tiny indents where small fingers must have pressed notes over and over. He had seen enough instruments to know when one had been well used. As he shifted the violin, the corner of the case lining lifted. At first it looked like a tear, but something white was wedged beneath the fabric. Keanu slid his hand inside and pulled it out carefully. It was a note. Fold twice, edges soft with age. He opened it slowly. Written in bright pink crayon, in large, uneven letters, were the words, "To the family I hope finds me someday. My name is Leah. Please, don't forget me. 2006. Keanu stood still for a long moment. The note trembled slightly in his fingers. The handwriting was unmistakably that of a child. Big loops, some letters backwards, others nearly falling off the edge of the page. A simple message, but one that carried a weight far beyond its words. He read it again. "To the family I hope finds me someday. Please don't forget me." There was no address, no last name, just the name Leah and the date 2006. Keanu looked back down at the violin. It hadn't just been left behind, it had been planted, left with intention, as if someone was hoping this exact moment might happen, even if it took years. He gently folded the note and placed it back into the violin case beneath the velvet lining. Then he closed the lid and carried the case to the counter. The woman at the register looked up from her book. "Find something interesting?" she asked with a warm smile. Keanu paused for a beat, then gave a nod. "Yeah, something like that." She rang it up. The price tag read $12. "No tax today," she said. "It's donation weekend." He thanked her and stepped out into the sunlight, violin case in hand. The salt air greeted him again, but now it felt different. He wasn't just carrying a forgotten instrument. He was carrying someone's message. Someone who had reached out 17 years ago, hoping someone, anyone, would hear her. Back at the small hotel room where he was staying, Keanu laid the violin on the bed and opened it again. He removed the note and read it a third time. There was something deeply unsettling about it. She hadn't said goodbye. She hadn't said where she was from. She had written as if she were lost. Or maybe expecting to be. Keanu placed the violin gently on the table and sat beside it. He picked up his phone and took a picture of the note. Then he messaged Sophia. "Just found something." He waited a moment. The typing bubbles appeared almost instantly. "What is it?" "A child's violin, with a note inside." He sent her the photo. Less than a minute later, Sophia replied, "Where did you find this?" "Thrift store, small town outside Santa Barbara." She sent one more message. "Don't leave. I'll meet you in the morning." Keanu stared at the violin again. He didn't know Leah. He didn't know what happened to her. But something in his chest told him this wasn't just a forgotten toy. It was a breadcrumb, and somewhere, the rest of the story was waiting to be found. Keanu barely slept that night. The note looped through his mind like a haunting melody, something incomplete and unresolved. He thought about the handwriting, the pink crayon, the way the words "Don't forget me" clung to the page like a plea. At sunrise, he walked down to the ocean. The waves rolled in quietly, slow and even. He carried the violin case with him, tucked under one arm as he stood near the edge of the sand. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The message had already taken root. By 9 a.m., Sophia arrived. She stepped out of a rideshare holding her tablet, already scrolling through records and scribbled notes. "You weren't kidding," she said, as Keanu handed her the note. She studied it for a moment. No last name, no contact info, but the handwriting and the way she phrases it, this wasn't just a message, it was a cry. They took the violin back to the hotel and laid everything out on the table. Note case, stickers, every detail they could analyze. "There's a rehearsal list," Sophia said, pointing to a torn slip of paper still tucked behind one of the case pockets. "Music school, maybe?" Keanu nodded. "There's also a sticker, sunset strings. That ring any bells?" Sophia was already typing. "Could be a youth orchestra or a local music program." She turned the tablet toward him. Sunset Strings, small community orchestra based in San Fernando Valley, started in 2004. Keanu looked at the date on the note again. 2006. "Fits the timeline," he said, "so maybe she was part of the program." Sophia dug deeper. "If we can find an old roster or attendance list, we might be able to confirm her full name." Keanu sat back in the chair, still holding the violin in his lap. She played it like someone trying to leave a trail. Sophia paused. "Do you think she wanted someone to find her? Or remember her?" "Maybe both," Keanu said. "Maybe that was all she had left." They spent the rest of the morning making calls, contacting the thrift store and requesting any possible donation records. Nothing helpful. No name attached, no memory of who brought it in, just an old box marked "Instruments." As the afternoon sun warmed the windows, Keanu glanced at the violin one more time. This wasn't just about music. It was about someone who had been separated from something, or someone, they loved. And in that small case, through broken strings and faded stickers, that love was still speaking. Sophia sat cross-legged on the hotel carpet, the violin case open in front of her. The soft hum of traffic outside was the only sound in the room. Keanu handed her the folded note again, and she held it gently by the corners, as if afraid it might crumble. "Shame-used pink crayon," Sophia said quietly. "That's not just a message. That's a child doing everything she can to be seen." Keanu nodded. "It doesn't read like something left by accident." "It wasn't," Sophia said. "Look at the fold lines. It was placed with care. And the handwriting, it's big, open. She wasn't trying to hide it. She was leaving something behind on purpose." They sat with that thought for a moment. "I keep thinking about the words," Keanu said. "Not just the plea, 'Don't forget me,' but the way she says, 'To the family I hope finds me.' She wasn't writing to strangers. She was writing to someone she imagined she belonged to." Sophia traced the edges of the letter again. "There's something heartbreakingly hopeful about it." Keanu reached into the violin case and gently pulled out the faded rehearsal schedule again. The ink had bled in a few places, but the words were still visible. Sunset Strings, Spring 2006, Group B, Monday and Thursday rehearsals, Youth Room 3B. There were smudges and a small sticker of a music note taped to the corner. Keanu flipped it over. No names, just dates and times, but it was enough. She left a trail, he said. They placed the schedule beside the violin and note, lining everything up like pieces of a puzzle. I called the thrift store this morning, Sophia added. No donor records. Apparently they get boxes dropped off after hours. This one was found near a donation bin last week. So, we can't trace it back that way? Keanu said. Not directly, Sophia replied, but this, Sunset Strings, that might give us a place to start. She pulled out her tablet and typed rapidly, pulling up regional arts programs across California. A few seconds later, she turned the screen toward Keanu. Community Youth Music Program, founded 2004, based in San Fernando Valley, still active, still running, youth rehearsals in Studio City. Keanu leaned in. And it says here, Sophia continued, they keep alumni rosters. He nodded slowly. Then we start there. The violin sat quietly beside them, the strings broken, the wood dry. But the silence was no longer empty. He was waiting. Sophia's fingers flew across her keyboard as she dug deeper into the Sunset Strings archives. The program's old website had been updated several times, but luckily, an alumni page listed names from each year. She scrolled down until she hit 2006. There it was. Group B, Spring Season, Junior Ensemble, Leo Rivera. Found her, Sophia said, pointing to the screen. Leah Rivera, age listed as 9 at the time. Keanu leaned forward. No contact info? No, just a list. But if she was 9 in 2006, that means she was born around 1997. She'd be in her mid-20s now. Keanu looked at the name again. Rivera. That gives us something. Sophia nodded. Now we cross-entry with school records, adoption logs, foster placement archives. If she was in foster care, we might be able to track movement by district. Keanu was quiet for a moment. He picked up the violin again and turned it over in his hands. You know, I used to play guitar when I was a kid, he said. Not well, but enough to know that instruments carry more than just sound. They carry memory. Sophia looked up. After my dad left, Keanu continued, I found an old acoustic in a pawn shop. I didn't have lessons, just taught myself to strum chords until the noise became something else. It wasn't about the music. It was about what it covered. Sophia listened closely. Sometimes we hold on to broken things, he said, because they're the only parts of the story we still recognize. She nodded slowly. Maybe this violin was that for her. Something she could hold when everything else was slipping. Keanu placed the instrument back in its case, and maybe letting go of it was her way of leaving proof she existed. Sophia returned to the search. Okay, let's assume she stayed in the area for at least another year. If she was part of a music program, she probably went to a school with arts funding. That narrows it down. She pulled up a list of public elementary schools near Studio City with music programs in 2006. Here we go, she said. Baldwin Elementary. Public records show a student named Leah Rivera was enrolled in 2005 through 2007. Any siblings listed? Sophia scanned the screen. Says she had a younger brother. First name Lucas. No last name. Keanu's breath caught. She had a brother, he said. Yeah, Sophia replied, and I think that's who she was writing to. Keanu sat back and looked at the violin case resting on the table. So she was 9, her brother was probably younger, maybe 4 or 5. Sophia clicked through a few more archived records. Looks like there was a transfer order in 2007. Leah was moved to a different foster placement. It says the sibling was left behind due to a lack of dual placement availability. Keanu's voice dropped. Separated. Sophia nodded. And here's the kicker. The file mentions Leah requesting not to be moved, says she was vocal about staying with her brother. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment. She left the violin after that, didn't she? Probably right before or after. There's a record from her caseworker stating she donated personal items to a community center shortly after the transition. Keanu turned toward her. What if this violin wasn't just left behind? It was a signal, Sophia finished. A message in a bottle. He looked back down at the letter. Please don't forget me. The room felt heavier now, like every line they uncovered pulled them deeper into a story that hadn't been finished yet. Sophia sat back and let out a breath. She aged out of the system. After 16, most files go quiet. Unless she was adopted or took a different name, she might have just disappeared from public records. But someone like her wouldn't stop searching, Keanu said. She played music. She held on. Maybe she found a way back into the world. Sophia stood. We need to find her. We will, Keanu said. And when we do, we're bringing this violin with us. He picked it up again, gently running a thumb across the cracked bridge. It still matters, he said. They packed everything carefully. The letter, the rehearsal schedule, the rehearsal sticker, every clue they had. Outside, the sun was beginning to dip. The ocean breeze filtered through the window, soft and steady. Sophia placed the case in her bag. Well, let's drive back tonight, she said. If she's out there, I want her to know someone's listening now. Keanu nodded. They didn't know where the road would lead, but they knew where it started. With a crayon note, a broken violin, and a girl who wanted to be remembered. The morning light poured through the tall windows of the foundation's main floor, landing softly on the violin case resting on Keanu's desk. He had carried it through the night, across towns, out of the thrift store, and into this quiet space that often held stories heavier than its walls could speak. Sophia was already working in the next room, scanning records and making quiet calls. They were chasing the name Leah Rivera now, slowly but surely. But Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that the real work had already begun when he read the note. To the family I hope finds me someday. That wasn't something you wrote lightly. That was something you wrote when everything else had failed. He opened the Foundation's online community board, a space created years ago for anyone impacted by the foster system, adoption, or family loss. The stories posted there ranged from small memories to long, emotional journeys of reconnection. Some were anonymous. Others left names and photos. Keanu clicked into the post editor. He stared at the empty box for a long minute, then typed slowly, each word deliberate. This week, I found something unexpected at a thrift store just off the coast. A small, worn violin case, barely visible behind a stack of toys and games. Inside, a child-sized violin. Strings broken, bridge cracked, stickers peeling. And under the lining, a note. Written in pink crayon in a child's hand, dated 2006. It said, "To the family I hope finds me someday. My name is Leah. Please, don't forget me." No last name, no address, just those words. It's been 17 years since she left that note. We don't know who she is yet, but we're trying to find her. And it made me wonder, have you ever left something behind on purpose, hoping someone might find it someday? A letter, a toy, a photo, anything. If you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to hear your story. He read it back once, made no edits, and hit post. The first response came within 5 minutes. When I was 10, I slid a drawing under the seat of a school bus. It was a picture of my dog and me, right before he died. I didn't know who would find it. I just didn't want it to disappear with me. Then another. I left a photograph in a church pew while moving through foster care. It was the only one I had of my brother and me before we were separated. I didn't think I'd ever see him again. I just wanted someone to know we existed. The post began to spread. Sophia walked into the room with coffee and glanced at the screen. That was fast. Keanu nodded. People are carrying things they never got to say. Within the hour, there were over 200 replies. One came from a teacher in Montana. A child once tucked a toy dinosaur into my classroom bookshelf before he moved schools. No note, just the toy. 2 years later, a new student picked it up and said, "This belonged to my brother." They had been separated through the system. We didn't even know they were related. Another user wrote, "When my foster mom gave away my teddy bear, I hid a letter inside it first. I wrote, 'I'm sorry I couldn't stay. If you find this, I loved you once.'" Someone else shared, "I used to bury notes in the backyard of every home I stayed in. I signed them all with the same line, 'Still here.' I don't know if anyone ever found them, but it helped me survive." A former caseworker chimed in, "Children leave clues more often than people realize. Stickers on walls, names carved in bunk beds, a plastic ring hidden in the lining of a suitcase. They're not just forgettable moments. They're silent declarations. I was here." Keanu scrolled, reading every word. The stories varied in length and tone, but they all carried the same quiet ache. Not all wounds shout. Some leave toys in thrift stores. Some draw suns on lined paper and slide them behind drawers. Some press their names into drywall with a dull pencil. Sophia sat beside him, sipping her coffee slowly. "It's not just the object," she said. "It's the hope that someone will care enough to notice." Keanu nodded. "And carry it forward." He clicked on a post marked anonymous. The words were simple, but they cut through the noise. "We didn't have pictures, so we left objects to prove we existed." He sat with that one for a long time. It reminded him of Leah's note, of the crayon, the language, the bravery of it. She wasn't begging, she was documenting. "I mattered, I was here." By late afternoon, the comment thread had passed 1,000 replies. One young woman wrote, "When I was 7, I left my name and a drawing of a tree inside the wall of a shelter we stayed at for a few weeks. My mom said we had to leave before sunrise. I drew the tree anyway. I didn't want the world to forget me." Another shared, "I was placed with 3 different families before I turned 12. Before each move, I'd write my brother's name on something, a cup, a toy, a lunchbox, and leave it behind. I told myself that if he ever walked through those doors, he'd know I was there." An older man posted, "My sister and I were split when we were young. She always wore a bracelet with tiny bells. When we were taken away, she pressed it into my hand and said, 'If you ever hear it again, that's me.' I lost it years ago, but I still hear bells in my sleep." Keanu printed out that comment and taped it on the wall outside his office. Soon the hallway was filled with pinned pages, printouts of the most moving replies. Visitors at the foundation began stopping to read them. Some stood in silence, others cried. A teenage boy visiting the youth program read one aloud, then added his own on a sticky note. "I used to tuck messages into the pockets of clothes I donated. One day I hope someone wears my words." Even the staff started contributing. A counselor left this note on the board. "A girl once gave me a marble with her name carved in it. She said, 'You'll remember me now.' I still have it in my desk." The board soon filled with paper cranes, old photos, and new handwritten letters from people who had never spoken of these moments before. Sophia looked at Keanu. "This isn't just a response to Leah. It's a community coming back to itself." Keanu gently placed the violin case on the table in front of the wall. No sign, no explanation, just the instrument that started it all. And for those who knew, that was enough. By the end of the day, one final message came in. No name, no location, just words. "I left my favorite book in a bus station when I aged out of care. Inside was a letter I wrote to the little brother they wouldn't let me keep. I hope he found it. If not, I hope someone did, because stories aren't real until someone reads them." Keanu read it out loud, slowly. Then he whispered, "He found it." And as the foundation's front lights dimmed and the city outside quieted into evening, the violin remained at rest, its strings, but it had already played its song, one that echoed through 1,000 memories, and brought them finally to the surface. The next morning, Sophia and Keanu sat at the Foundation's resource center, A converted conference room stacked with case files, laptops, and empty coffee mugs. The violin rested on the windowsill behind them. Outside, traffic moved steadily, unaware of the silent storm unfolding inside the room. Sophia had pulled the 2006 roster for the Sunset Strings Junior Ensemble from archived online newsletters. It was a digital scan, grainy but legible enough. She scrolled slowly through the list of names, fingers hovering just above the screen. Then she stopped. "There," she said. "Group B, Junior Ensemble, Spring 2006. Leah Rivera." Keanu leaned in. Her name was listed halfway down the page, next to a symbol that identified her as a student receiving financial aid. Sophia clicked into the file. "Her registration info lists her as a foster youth," she said. "No parent signature, just a line that reads, Authorized Guardian, CFS District 12. Keanu's eyes stayed locked on the name. "Did she finish the season?" he asked. Sophia scrolled further. "No. Notes say she left mid-season, no reason provided, just marked as withdrawn." "Was she moved?" Keanu asked. "Probably," Sophia replied. "If she was reassigned or placed into another home, it would have meant transferring schools and losing access to the program." Keanu looked at the violin again. "Shin didn't just quit." Sophia agreed. "She lost something." She opened a public access database used by nonprofits to track foster system placement logs. The interface was old, slow, but still usable. She searched the name Leah Rivera. It took a moment to load. Then the screen flashed with a case number and basic record history. "Got her," Sophia whispered. "District 12, initial placement at age 5, moved twice by the time she was 9. "Does it say why she left her last placement?" Keanu asked. Sophia narrowed her eyes, reading carefully. "There's a mention of a transition, February 2006. No misconduct. No incident. Just a line that reads, Placement restructured due to sibling separation policy override." Keanu sat up straighter. "Wait, sibling?" Sophia clicked deeper. She had a brother, younger, name listed as Lucas. They were placed together initially, then she was moved. Keanu was silent. Sophia kept reading. "No follow-up contact recorded. Leah's next placement was out of county. Lucas stayed behind." "They were separated?" Keanu said slowly. Sophia nodded, and not by choice. They stared at the screen in silence. "She was taken," Keanu said finally, and she knew what it meant. Sophia leaned back, eyes still fixed on the records. The system's policy is supposed to prioritize keeping siblings together, but here, look, there's a notation. Override due to administrative housing capacity. "So there wasn't enough space?" Keanu asked. "Exactly. They had a bed for her, but not both, so they split them." "And didn't follow up?" Keanu asked, his voice sharp. "No records of sibling visits, no request for reunification. After she was moved, her file goes quiet." Keanu stood and walked over to the violin. He opened the case and stared at it again. "She left the note that same year," he said. "That wasn't a goodbye. It was a signal." "A breadcrumb," Sophia said softly. "She didn't run away," Keanu added. "She left proof. Proof for someone who might come looking." Sophia's eyes flicked back to the screen. "There's one more name on the record," she said. "Assigned caseworker for the transition, Marla Whitaker. Still listed as active in the network." "Can we reach her?" Keanu asked. "I can try," Sophia said. "If she's still in the district, she might remember." Within 10 minutes, Sophia had the number. She placed the call while Keanu waited quietly. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. "This is Marla," the voice said. Sophia introduced herself and explained the situation. Then she mentioned the name. There was a pause. "Leah Rivera?" the woman repeated. "I haven't heard that name in a long time." Sophia's tone softened. "We found a note from 2006, left inside a violin case. We think she wrote it." Marla's voice grew quiet. "That little girl was special. Do you remember what happened? Sophia asked. Another pause. Yes, Marla said finally. She was gifted, quiet, but the kind of quiet that holds something big. Music was her language. She played like someone searching. Her record says she had a brother, Sophia said. Yes, Marla answered. Lucas. She adored him. They were inseparable. Then why were they moved separately? Keanu asked, leaning in. There was a long silence. Then Marla said it. They were separated by accident. The words hung in the air like an invisible weight. Sophia blinked. What do you mean by accident? Marla exhaled slowly. There was an internal clerical mix-up during a major district realignment. Dozens of kids were being reassigned. Their files were digitized and some data was scrambled in the transition. Are you saying she was moved without anyone realizing her brother was still in placement? Keanu asked. Yes, Marla said. By the time we noticed, she was already out of county, and the policy didn't allow backtracking after reassignment unless there was a critical error on paper. She was 9, Keanu said quietly. She begged us not to separate them, Marla said. I remember that. She asked me to give Lucas her violin. She said he liked when she played it. Keanu's voice cracked slightly. Did you? Marla hesitated. I don't know. I think I meant to, but it never made it to him. I assume it was left at the shelter or sent to storage. It ended up in a thrift store, Keanu said. Marla was quiet again. She was a good kid, she said finally. She deserved better. They both did. Do you know where she went? Sophia asked. Do you know if she stayed in the system? I don't, Marla said. After 16, most of those records became sealed unless there was a legal request or family re-entry. But she stayed in my thoughts, especially when I hear music. Keanu glanced again at the violin. She didn't stop, he said. What do you mean? Marla asked. She's still out there, Keanu said. Still playing, maybe. Still waiting. Sophia ended the call after thanking Marla, then sat back in her chair, stunned. So, it was a mistake, she said. A mistake that changed their lives, Keanu replied. One file error, and a family disappeared. He looked back at the instrument on the windowsill. She left it behind not because she was giving up, he said. She was trying to leave something behind, something he could find, something anyone could find. Sophia nodded. Then we need to follow it. Keanu turned toward her. We will. No more accidents. Not this time. He picked up the violin and closed the case gently. We're going to find her. And somewhere, in a corner of California, a woman named Leah still waited. Not just to be remembered, but to be found. The next step wasn't easy. Even with the Foundation's reputation and Sophia's connections, getting access to older foster system case files was a slow process. Privacy laws, red tape, outdated storage systems, it all added layers of delay. But after several persistent calls and a signed request from a supervising social worker, they were granted limited access to Leah Rivera's archived file. He had arrived 2 days later, delivered in a thick manila envelope marked District 12, Carshall Record. Keanu and Sophia opened it together at the Foundation's conference room table. Inside were faded forms, handwritten notes, and typed summaries. An entire childhood documented in impersonal checkboxes and scribbled margin notes. The first page listed Leah's intake information. Age 5, removed from parental custody due to neglect, placed with her younger brother Lucas Rivera. They read through the early records together. Placement 1 lasted a year, placement 2, 6 months, then placement 3, the one she was in when she joined the Sunset Strings program. She was there for just under 2 years, Sophia said, flipping through progress reports. She finally had some stability, Keanu said. Until the transfer, Sophia replied. They found the transition paperwork, February 2006. Leah's file had been updated with a new placement address. Lucas's file, however, did not match. A clerical note in the margin read, "Sibling placed separately due to capacity limit." Temporary split, approved. Keanu shook his head. That's the same phrase Marla used. And here, Sophia said, tapping another page, look at this. Leah submitted 3 requests for sibling visitation in the 6 months following her move. All were marked unresolved. No contact allowed, Keanu whispered. There were no returned letters, no documented responses. Just silence. And after a while, even that faded. By the time Leah was 13, the file had thinned dramatically. Caseworker notes were brief. School attendance average, emotional status listed as withdrawn. One line stood out. Client exhibits signs of resignation. Lacks long-term planning engagement. Music remains primary emotional outlet. Then came a note from her 16th birthday, written by a temporary caseworker named Denise. It read, Leah gave away her violin today, said it was time to let it go, didn't explain further. Keanu sat back in his chair. She didn't give up the violin, he said. Sophia looked at him. What do you mean? She didn't give it away out of despair. She gave it away to be found. The same way she wrote the note. The violin was a message. Keanu kept reading the file, page by page. There were no dramatic events, no flagged incidents, just a slow, quiet decline in activity. Leah stopped requesting visits. She stopped writing. Her grades plateaued, then dropped. But every other report mentioned one consistent thing. She still played music. One case summary said, Leah attends music class regularly, shows talent but avoids performances, has begun teaching younger foster kids basic violin during aftercare. Another note. Client becomes visibly upset when asked about sibling, redirects conversation, uses music to self-regulate. Sophia highlighted that one with a pen. She never got closure, she said. Keanu nodded. She was carrying grief no one else acknowledged. The final section of the file was marked Age Out Summary. It was a standard form, the kind filled out when a minor leaves the system at 18 without permanent placement. It read, Client aged out without reunification, no legal guardianship, no contact with biological relatives recorded. Last known address, Transitional Housing, East San Diego. Future contact, unknown. There was no ceremony, no farewell, just a date, a stamped form, and a name. But something else caught Sophia's attention. A small addendum paperclip to the back. It was from her final caseworker, dated just before Leah left care. Client donated several personal belongings to the neighborhood community center, among them a child-sized violin in a worn case. Keanu closed his eyes. She planted it, he said. She left it the way you leave a note in a bottle. Sophia whispered. And the letter? It was the last thing she could give, Keanu said. If she couldn't find him, maybe someone else would. They sat in silence for a while. The case file was now a mosaic of pieces. A girl with talent. A separation that never should have happened. An unanswered trail of questions. And a final act of defiance disguised as surrender. Keanu reached for the violin case again. He opened it gently and ran his fingers along the inside lining. She tucked the letter under the fabric because she knew it wouldn't be read right away, he said. But she hoped one day someone would care enough to look. Sophia nodded. And you did. No, Keanu replied. We did. That evening, Keanu stood in front of the foundation's community wall. Dozens of new messages had been added since his post about Leah's violin. Visitors had pinned notes, photos, even small objects. A rubber bracelet, a folded paper crane, a hand-drawn picture of a violin with the word remember written underneath. He placed a copy of Leah's case summary on the board, not the whole file, just the part about the violin. Beside it, he pinned the question again. Have you ever left something behind on purpose, hoping someone might find it someday? The wall was filling fast. Sophia stepped beside him, holding the roster from Sunset Strings. I've started reaching out to staff who worked there in 2006, she said. There's a teacher who might remember her. I have an interview set up for tomorrow. Keanu nodded, his eyes still on the board. "We're getting close," he said. "And Lucas?" she asked. "No trace yet," Keanu replied. "His records ended earlier. He may have been adopted. Name could have changed." "We'll keep looking." Keanu looked down at the violin again. "It's strange," he said. "Sometimes the loudest stories are the ones told with the least words. She didn't yell. She didn't write a memoir. She didn't scream her pain into the system. She just placed it inside a case and walked away." Sophia added, "Because she didn't think anyone would listen." Keanu looked at her. "But we are now." They left the board and returned to the office. The file was back on the table. The last note from the caseworker, the one about Leah giving up the violin, sat on top. Keanu picked it up and read it again. Said it was time to let it go. He whispered the words slowly, like they were sacred. "She let go of the instrument," he said, "but not the hope." Sophia packed the documents carefully. "I'm going to request her file be unsealed for continuity investigation," she said. "If we can show cause that her separation from Lucas was a system error, we might be able to track him legally." Keanu nodded. "Whatever it takes." The violin case clicked shut. This time, it wasn't just holding wood and strings. He was holding a truth, a story that deserved to be finished, and they were ready to carry it forward. The next morning, Keanu and Sophia drove east toward the San Fernando Valley. They had managed to locate a retired music teacher from Baldwin Elementary listed in Leah Rivera's school records between 2005 and 2007. Her name was Ellen Walsh, and she had taught music for over 30 years before stepping away from the classroom in 2012. She lived in a modest single-story house shaded by a tall jacaranda tree. A wind chime jingled gently from the front porch as Sophia knocked on the door. Ellen answered wearing a loose sweater and holding a mug of tea. Her face lit up when she heard why they were there. "Leah Rivera," she said softly. "Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time, but I remember her." She led them inside to a cozy living room filled with books, framed photographs, and musical memorabilia, faded programs from student recitals, newspaper clippings, and a few dusty violin cases tucked into the corner. "She was quiet," Ellen said, settling into an armchair, "but not the withdrawn kind. She just had this stillness to her, like she was always listening for something the rest of us couldn't hear." Keanu nodded. "Do you remember how she played?" Ellen smiled. "Oh, I remember that clearly. That girl played like she was speaking to someone who wasn't in the room. You felt it when she picked up the bow. She didn't play for applause. She played for someone." Sophia leaned forward. "Do you happen to have any recordings?" Ellen stood, walked over to a cabinet, and opened a drawer filled with old DVDs and labeled discs. "Let's see. Spring recital, yes. 2006, she said, pulling out a disc in a plastic sleeve. This was the last one she played before she left. She brought it over and placed it into a small player connected to the television. The screen flickered to life. The camera panned across a tiny auditorium, showing rows of foldable chairs, handmade decorations, and a paper sign that read, "Spring Strings Recital, Room 3B." Ellen fast-forwarded through a few students until the camera centered on a small girl with long dark hair stepping onto the stage. "That's her," Ellen said softly. "That's Leah." Leah stood at the front of the makeshift stage in a plain white dress, her violin cradled under her chin like something sacred. She didn't smile. She didn't fidget. She just lifted the bow and began to play. The room fell still, even on the grainy video. The piece wasn't complex, just a slow melody, simple and raw. But the way she played it, it felt like a lullaby to someone who hadn't been tucked in for a very long time. There was no hesitation, only grief that had been turned into grace. Keanu's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. "I've seen professionals play their whole lives," he said quietly. "But that was something else." Sophia nodded, eyes misty. "She never looked at the audience," Ellen added. "She kept her eyes fixed on one spot in the back row. I always wondered who she was playing to." As the camera zoomed out at the end of the piece, Keanu leaned forward. "Wait, pause it there," he said. Ellen paused the video. In the lower corner of the screen, near the end of the last row of chairs, a small boy sat on the edge of his seat. He was no more than 5 years old, hands clasped under his chin, eyes wide with wonder. And as Leah finished the last note, he burst into applause. Not polite clapping, but an enthusiastic, overjoyed flurry of small hands smacking together. "Who's that?" Keanu asked. Ellen looked at the screen, then back at them. "Oh," she said softly. That was her little brother. He came to every recital, sat in the same seat, called her Lala. Sophia blinked. "You remember that?" Ellen nodded. He couldn't pronounce her name when he was younger, so he called her Lala, and it stuck. She'd always smile when he said it. Keanu turned back to the paused screen, focusing on the boy's face. "That's him," he said. "That's Lucas." Ellen searched the shelf again and found a printed copy of the recital program. Each student's name was listed in order of performance. Leah Rivera, violin solo, song for one. Keanu touched the paper gently. "She named the piece." "Yes," Ellen said. "She did. I remember asking her about the title, and she told me it's for someone who can't hear it now, but maybe one day they will." Sophia whispered, "She meant him." Ellen handed Keanu a copy of the DVD and the recital program. "You can keep these," she said. "Maybe they'll help." Keanu accepted them with care, as if receiving pieces of something sacred. "Do you remember where she went afterward?" he asked. Ellen shook her head. "She just stopped coming, no explanation. I asked the office and they said she'd transferred schools, but no one knew where. She vanished." Sophia said, "Her case file confirms that's when she was moved. Her brother stayed. They were never reunited." Ellen sighed, her eyes heavy. That explains the look in her eyes that day. She already knew. Keanu studied the boy's face on the screen again. "That applause," he said. "That was love. Pure, uncomplicated love." He turned toward Sophia. "Now we have his face, a name, a nickname, and the year." Sophia nodded. "I'll cross-center record that against district school rosters for younger children with the first name Lucas. We know his last name was Rivera at the time. If he was enrolled in the same school that year, we might get a match. And if he was adopted," Keanu added, "he may have taken a new last name." "We'll run both angles," Sophia said. Ellen walked them to the front porch. "I'm glad you're doing this," she said. "That girl, she deserved to be heard, and he adored her. You should have seen how he used to hold her hand during music breaks. She was his whole world." Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe they can be part of each other's world again. As they walked back to the car, Sophia clutched the DVD case to her chest. "I can't stop hearing the way she played," she said. "There was something unfinished about it." Keanu nodded. It was a song meant for someone who didn't get to hear the ending. They got into the car. Keanu started the engine, but he didn't pull away right away. He looked out the window at the jacaranda tree swaying above Ellen's house. "We're getting close," he said. "Closer than we've ever been." Sophia turned to him. "Do you think he remembers her?" Keanu looked back at the screen on the dashboard, where Leah's paused image still showed mid-bow. "I don't think he ever forgot," he said. "She was his Lala." And somewhere in the echoes of that applause, a memory was waiting to be awakened. The next morning, Sophia walked into Keanu's office with a name, an address, and a quiet certainty in her voice. "I found her," she said. Keanu stood, startled by the speed of it. "You're sure?" Sophia nodded. "There's Leah Rivera, 28, living in San Diego. She teaches music at a nonprofit community school in South Park. Her staff bio says she started there 4 years ago, after working at a transitional arts program for at-risk youth." Keanu's voice dropped. "That's her. I called the school. She teaches violin and vocal fundamentals. Kids adore her. Her colleagues describe her as quiet but deeply connected. She doesn't talk much about her past, but she brings in old sheet music, sometimes original compositions, and once a year, she organizes a student recital titled Songs for One. Keanu closed his eyes. "She's still carrying it," he whispered. "All of it." "I don't think she ever stopped," Sophia said. They didn't wait. By midday, Keanu was driving south along the freeway with the violin resting gently in the back seat, buckled in like a fragile passenger. It was late afternoon when he pulled into the parking lot of the small community school. The building was modest, painted with murals of children playing instruments under painted suns and clouds. The sound of laughter echoed from the open windows, but Keanu's focus narrowed as he stepped inside. He asked for Leah at the front desk. The receptionist pointed toward a music room near the back of the building. Keanu walked down the hallway, each step carrying the weight of 17 years and one crayon-colored note. At the door, he paused. Through the small window, he saw her Leah, standing in front of a group of children, gently correcting their posture as they played scales on beginner violins. Her long, dark hair was pulled into a loose braid, and she wore a soft denim shirt over a floral dress. Her presence was calm, centered. She smiled gently as one of the students squeaked a note too sharply and laughed along with them. Keanu didn't knock. He waited until the lesson ended and the children filed out. Then he stepped inside. Leah turned, startled at first by the presence of a stranger in her classroom. "Can I help you?" she asked, cautious but polite. Keanu stepped forward slowly, violin case in hand. He set it down gently on the table in front of her. "I think this belongs to you," he said. She looked at it, confused at first, then frozen. Her hands drifted toward the case, hesitant, as if afraid to open it. Keanu gave a small nod. She undid the latches. When she saw the violin, her breath caught in her throat. And when she lifted the lining and saw the folded piece of paper still inside, she staggered back a step. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible." Her hand moved to her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly. "I left that," she said. "I left it the day I turned 16. Keanu stayed silent. She opened the note. Her hands were shaking. Her lips moved as she read the words, but no sound came. "I wrote this for him," she said softly. "I didn't know where he went. No one would tell me. They told me he was fine, that I should focus on moving on. But I couldn't. He was just gone." Keanu pulled a chair beside her, but didn't speak. He let her hold the moment. "I tried everything," she said. "Letters, calls, I even checked old placement databases. But every door was shut, every file was sealed. I thought, if I left this somewhere, someone might find it. Maybe someone would care enough to wonder." Her voice broke. "I didn't think anyone ever would." Keanu said nothing. He didn't have to. Leah pressed the note against her chest like it was a lifeline. "I thought I was shouting into a void," she whispered. "But you heard me." He finally spoke. "I didn't find it," he said. "It found me." She looked at him, unsure how to process the weight of it all. "You kept it safe," she said. "I just followed where it led," Keanu replied. "And it led here." Leah sat down slowly, the violin still in its case, the note still in her hand. "I've been teaching for years now," she said, "trying to give kids what I didn't have, a place to play, a place to feel safe. But I never stopped wondering, never stopped listening for him." Keanu met her eyes. "Maybe it's time someone helped finish what you started." The room was quiet now. The sun had shifted in the sky, casting golden light across the shelves lined with sheet music and teaching books. Leah ran her fingers along the old violin. "I remember every scratch," she said. "That dent in the scroll, that was from the night I dropped it when I found out he was staying behind." Her voice softened. "I hated the system, but I never hated him. I just didn't want him to think I forgot him. That's what kept me up at night, not the loss, but the idea that he might believe I stopped caring." Keanu leaned forward. He didn't forget you." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I've seen him," Keanu said. "Not face to face, but I've seen video, a recital, you playing, and a little boy clapping in the corner so hard it shook the camera. A teacher remembered you both. She said he called you Lala. Leah smiled through the tears. He couldn't say my name. It stuck. She looked down at the letter again. It was the only way I knew how to say, I'm still here. I didn't know if he'd grow up and forget my face, my voice, but I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd hear a note or find this and remember. Keanu pulled a small envelope from his jacket. I don't have all the answers yet, he said, but we're close. And if you're ready, we'd like to help find him. Leah looked at him, barely blinking. I am, she whispered. More than anything. She held the violin in her lap, then drew the bow across the strings. It was scratchy, out of tune, but a note rang out anyway. A single note. And then another. A phrase she had once played in a room full of folding chairs to a boy in the last row who clapped like she hung the stars. She closed her eyes and played it again. And this time, it didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a beginning. Back at the Foundation's main office in Los Angeles, Keanu sat at his desk once again, the familiar weight of the violin case resting nearby. The walls were quieter that afternoon. Fewer voices, fewer footsteps. Just the hum of quiet thought. He opened the Foundation's community forum and stared at the post window. The first post, about finding the violin, had brought in thousands of responses. But now, with Leah's permission, he was ready to share a little more. Not names, not identifying details, just the heart of it. The silence between siblings. The ache of separation without goodbye. He began to type. This week we met a music teacher who once wrote a letter and tucked it into a violin case. She didn't know where her little brother had gone. The system had separated them without warning. No letters were answered, no visits allowed. So she left a note behind, tucked into a place only someone curious enough would find. 17 years passed. But the message waited. And now she's playing again. Not in grief, but in hope. So we want to ask you, have you ever been separated from someone you loved, with no way to say goodbye? Your story might help someone else heal. He clicked post. Then he waited. He didn't have to wait long. The comments came in slowly at first, then all at once. One of the first responses came from a man in Oregon. My sister and I were split at birth. I didn't even know she existed until I found a guitar we both remembered. We had matching stickers on the back. Hers had a ladybug. Mine had a star. It was all I needed to know it was real. We reunited 2 years ago, a young woman wrote. My foster mom donated my teddy bear when I was 8. It had a tiny heart sewn into the paw with my initials. Years later, I found it in a donation bin at a local shelter. The stitching was frayed, but I knew it was mine. I didn't find my sister, but I found her scent on that bear. It was something. Aerimizatomi, another said. My dad left when I was 5. No note, no goodbye, just gone. But when I cleaned out the garage years later, I found a birthday card addressed to me that he never mailed. It said, I didn't know how to stay, but I never stopped loving you. That card broke me. Then it helped me forgive him. Keanu read them all, one by one. Some were long paragraphs, others just a few lines, but each one was heavy with memory. His retired social worker shared. I used to keep a journal of every child who passed through my case files. Most days I couldn't keep siblings together, but I'd give them each something. A song lyric, a bracelet, a photo to hold on to. I still wonder if any of them found each other again. Another story came from someone named Caleb. When I was a kid, I gave my little brother a coin we had found on the street the day we were taken into care. He kept it in his shoe. We got split up 2 weeks later. I didn't see him for 10 years. But when we did meet again, the first thing he said was, I still have the coin. Keanu paused when he read that one. He printed it out and pinned it beside the first letter Leah had written. He added a note beneath it. Some things never get lost, They just wait. The violin, now framed in the lobby, had become something more than a memory. Visitors stopped to see it every day. Children pressed their hands to the glass. Adults left folded notes. And others just stood still, quietly connecting with a moment they'd never lived, but somehow understood. It wasn't just about a little girl anymore. It was about all of them. All the goodbyes that never happened. All the names never spoken. Oh, the love that stayed behind, waiting. The search for Lucas began with a single photograph, the one from the 2006 recital. The small boy clapping wildly in the back row. Keanu and Sophia took the image and cross-referenced the date with nearby elementary school records from the same year. They used every detail they had: first name, approximate age, the last name placement record, and the likelihood that his last name had changed after adoption. It took weeks. But eventually, one school popped up on the list. A public arts high school in Pasadena had a student named Lucas Mendez, age 17. Enrolled in their music department. Piano major. A sophomore who had transferred in during his freshman year. Sophia placed a call to the school, posing as a representative from a community foundation looking to offer scholarships for gifted music students with foster backgrounds. With permission from the school counselor, they scheduled an informal meeting. Keanu arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. He wore his simplest clothes, kept his presence low-key, and carried only two things: the framed photo from the recital and a copy of the violin recital program. The school counselor led them into a small practice room just off the music hallway. Sunlight poured in through a single window, and a well-worn upright piano sat in the corner. A few music books were stacked nearby, one of them covered in post-it notes and markings. Then Lucas walked in. 17, tall for his age, quiet in posture but alert in the eyes. He had that same pause Keanu recognized in kids who grew up learning how to protect their own silence. He glanced between Keanu and the counselor. "This is Mr. Reeves," the counselor said gently. "He's with a music outreach program. He just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, nothing formal." Lucas nodded. Keanu smiled, offering him a seat. "You play piano?" he asked. "Yeah," Lucas said, "since I was little." Keanu placed the recital photo on the table between them. "Have you ever seen this before?" he asked. Lucas leaned in. His body went still. Lucas stared at the image for several seconds. His eyes scanned the rows of folding chairs, the paper decorations taped to the wall, and finally the small girl standing at the front of the room, holding a violin. Then his gaze dropped to the lower corner of the image, where a little boy sat in the back row, hands mid-clap, smile wide. "That's you," Keanu said gently. Lucas didn't speak at first. His hand moved slowly to the edge of the photo. He touched it, not picking it up, just pressing his fingers against the paper. "I know that girl," he said quietly. "Do you remember her name?" Keanu asked. Lucas swallowed hard. "I called her Lala." He looked up slowly. "But that's not her real name. That's just what I used to say, because I couldn't pronounce her name. And then it stuck. She thought it was funny." Keanu nodded. "Her name is Leah," he said. "She's your sister." Lucas's breath hitched. He blinked fast and looked away. "For years," he whispered, "I thought maybe I made her up." "What do you mean?" Keanu asked softly. Lucas finally picked up the photo and held it in both hands. "I have these memories. Her reading to me, playing music, tying my shoes. But when I asked my adoptive parents, they said there was no record of a sibling, that I came in alone, that I must have imagined it." Keanu let the silence settle. "Believes it? She didn't forget you," he said. Lucas looked back up, his eyes suddenly watery. "She didn't? Like you are a drunkard." Seem tried everything. Letters, requests. She left this violin behind, just in case someone would care enough to ask the next question. Keanu reached into his bag and pulled out a copy of the recital program. She entitled piece she played, "Song for One." She was thinking of you. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment and smiled. I still hem it, he said. Not all of it, but parts. I thought I was making it up. I didn't know it was real. Keanu leaned forward, just slightly. I came today to ask you something, he said. Only if you're ready. No pressure. But Leah wants to meet you. Lucas didn't respond right away. He stared at the photo, his thumb moving along the edge where the paper had creased over time. I used to think I saw her in dreams, he said. I'd hear a violin, then wake up and forget the sound, just a feeling left behind. You never forgot, Keanu said. Lucas's eyes filled again, but he didn't cry. He sat a little taller in his chair. Where is she? Coming in San Diego, Keanu said. She's a music teacher. She still plays? Lucas laughed once under his breath. Of course she does, Keanu asked. Do you want to meet her? Lucas nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. I do. Then he paused. But can I bring my keyboard? Keanu smiled. I think she'd love that. The meeting was scheduled for the following weekend. Lucas asked if he could write her something first. Just a letter. Not long. Just a few words he'd wanted to say since he was 5. He handed Keanu a folded sheet of paper later that day. Inside, in his handwriting, were the words, Lala, I remembered. I just didn't know how to find you, but I never stopped listening. Keanu promised he'd deliver it himself. And when he stepped outside into the sunlight, the air felt full, not with answers, but with something better. Possibility. The classroom was quiet, the chairs stacked, the lights dimmed except for the late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds. Leah sat at her desk, the old violin resting nearby, its case still open, like it had never been closed in the first place. Keanu stood a few feet away, watching her silently as she held the envelope in her hand, the one Lucas had written just for her. She hadn't opened it yet. I'm scared, she said softly. Keanu didn't move closer. He let the stillness hold them both. You don't have to rush, he said. There's no deadline on healing. Leah looked down at the envelope again, her name written in a careful hand across the front. Just Lala. It had been years since anyone called her that. A name she thought had disappeared with childhood, a sound she thought only lived in one memory, long buried. Her fingers slid under the flap, slowly opening the paper. She unfolded the letter and began to read. As the words met her eyes, her breath caught. Her lips parted, trembling at the simplicity of it. The weight. Well, I remembered. I just didn't know how to find you, but I never stopped listening. No more than that, but it was everything. Leah pressed the letter to her chest and let the tears come. She didn't speak for several minutes. Keanu waited. There was nothing else to do but give her space. When she looked up again, her face was streaked with tears, but there was peace behind her eyes. Number 7 still calls me that, she said. I didn't think he would. Keanu smiled gently. He thought he made you up. Leah laughed, a soft, almost broken sound, but it carried something new. Relief? She pulled out a blank sheet of paper from her drawer, the same kind her students use to practice music theory. I don't want to write everything, she said, just the right things. She began slowly, pen trembling at first, then steadying. Dear Lucas, you were never lost to me. She paused, looked toward the violin, then kept writing. I looked in every file I could. I asked every caseworker, every placement office, but the answers never came. So I left you what I had, my music, and a letter tucked into the one thing I thought you might remember. She stopped again, tears dripping onto the edge of the page. I never forgot you, and now I know you didn't forget me either. She folded the letter carefully, pressing the crease like it was a final bow stroke. Then she handed it to Keanu. Will you take this to him? I will, he said. Lucas sat on the edge of his bed when Keanu arrived the next morning. His room was small but neat. Walls lined with music posters, a fold-out keyboard in the corner, and pages of handwritten sheet music taped above the desk. He looked nervous, not in a fearful way, but like someone about to open something sacred. Keanu handed him the envelope. Lucas stared at it for a long moment before opening it. His hands shook slightly. He unfolded the page and read every word slowly, lips moving silently as he followed each line. When he finished, he held the letter to his chest, just like Leah had. He didn't speak right away. Then, without looking up, he said, "She knew. She knew I'd still be listening." Keanu sat down beside him. "She said she didn't want to overwhelm you," he said. "She just wanted you to know she never stopped trying." Lucas took a deep breath and wiped his eyes. "I used to dream about her playing violin," he said. "Sometimes I'd wake up with a melody in my head and wonder where it came from. But it always felt like hers. I just didn't know why." He stood and walked over to his keyboard, flipping the switch. A soft hum filled the room. He tapped a few keys gently, letting a minor chord hang in the air, then transitioned into a melody. Delicate, hesitant. He looked over his shoulder. "This was the one," he said. "The tune I'd been playing since I was a kid. I didn't even know it was real until I read her letter." Keanu watched quietly as Lucas played. The melody was haunting. Unfinished. It rose, then fell, like it had been searching for an answer it never quite reached. But now, as he played it again, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a call, waiting for a response. When he finished, Lucas turned back to Keanu. "Will you give her something for me?" Keanu nodded. Lucas sat back down and picked up his notebook. He tore out a page and wrote quickly, this time not stopping or hesitating. When he was done, he folded the paper and held it out. Keanu didn't open it. He just tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Thank you," Lucas said, "for carrying this between us." "You're doing more than you think," Keanu replied. "You're bringing something back that was never supposed to be lost." Lucas smiled faintly. "You still playing?" Keanu nodded. "Every day." Lucas's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then I want to play with her. Someday." Keanu returned to San Diego the following evening. The sky had just begun to turn amber, the streets filled with the glow of storefronts and quiet commuters heading home. The community school was closed for the day, but Leah waited for him in her classroom, the lights dim, the violin sitting on a nearby stool like it belonged there. When Keanu entered, she stood slowly, her hands already pressed together, anticipation tight in her posture. "Did he write back?" she asked. Keanu nodded and handed her the folded note. She took it like it might vanish if she moved too fast. Then she sat down and opened it carefully. The letter was short. "Dear Lala, your song never left me. It lived in my fingers, in my dreams, in my silence. I thought I was playing alone, but now I know I was playing with you. I want to meet, but I want to bring my keyboard so I can finally answer your melody." Leah held the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. The room was quiet, but in her head she could already hear him, the boy who used to sit in the back row, clapping with his whole heart, now grown into a young man who had kept her song alive, even when the world forgot to tell him she was real. "Hill wants to play with me," she whispered. Keanu gave a soft smile. "He said he wants to answer your melody." Leah looked over at the violin and then at the piano in the corner of the room. She walked to it, sat down, and opened the lid. With a trembling hand, she played the opening line of the song she had written all those years ago, "Song for One." But this time, when she finished the phrase, she paused only for a breath. Then, softly, she added another line, a harmony, a space for someone else to join. She looked at Keanu with fresh tears in her eyes. "I'm ready," she said. "Tell him to bring his keyboard." Keanu stood in the doorway a moment longer, watching her fingers move across the keys. the room slowly filling with something larger than music. It was history being rewritten, not by force, but by invitation. He nodded. "I'll tell him." As he stepped back into the night, the sound of piano and violin blended through the window, two instruments long separated, now reaching across the silence. They hadn't spoken in years, but the notes had never stopped waiting. It was a Saturday morning when they agreed to meet. The school was closed to students, but the principal had unlocked the side entrance just for them. The music room stood quiet, sunlight spilling in through tall windows that faced the courtyard. Dust hung in the air like suspended memory, and the chairs were still stacked from Friday's last rehearsal. Leah arrived first, her restored violin in its polished case. She had restrung it the week before, oiled the bow, cleaned every inch until the instrument almost shimmered. But no amount of polish could erase the years it had carried. That was what made it beautiful. She placed it gently on the table near the chalkboard, then turned to the piano in the corner, giving it a soft glance, as if checking on an old friend. A few minutes later, the door creaked open. Lucas stepped inside, carrying a soft black keyboard case over his shoulder. He paused in the doorway, unsure whether to walk fast or slow, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Leah turned, their eyes locking for the first time in 17 years. Neither of them said a word. He set down the keyboard slowly. She stepped forward, her heart pounding so loudly she could feel it in her ears. He looked older, taller, and yet somehow still exactly the same. The shape of his smile, the tilt of his head when he wasn't sure if he was allowed to take up space. She had dreamed of this moment for so long it almost didn't feel real. Lucas finally spoke, just one word. "The no." Her throat tightened. She could barely nod. "Yes," she whispered. Then they stood there, staring at each other, the years collapsing silently between them. Neither one cried right away. They didn't rush. Leah reached for her violin, tucked it under her chin, and tested a note. It was soft, slightly flat, but real. Lucas unpacked his keyboard, plugged it into the wall, and pulled over a chair. He didn't sit just yet. He waited for her to begin. She took a deep breath. Then she said, "Want to try something?" He nodded. Leah inhaled slowly and let her bow fall into position. The soft tension of the strings met her fingertips like an old friend's embrace, familiar, yet trembling with memory. She had rehearsed this in her head so many times, but now that Lucas was sitting across from her, everything felt new, fragile. Lucas positioned his keyboard just right, plugging it in and adjusting the volume. He flexed his fingers once, twice, like a runner at the edge of a starting line. His eyes never left hers. Leah met his gaze, smiled just enough to break the tension, and asked, "Want to try something?" He nodded without a word. She began. Wanted the elite to do one note, then another. The melody was simple, something they both knew, though only she remembered playing it out loud. It was the tune she'd once played for him every night before bed, the one she carried for 17 years. The one she left behind inside a violin, wrapped in hope. Lucas recognized it immediately. His hands moved instinctively, joining in with soft chords that supported her lead without overpowering it. The moment his music joined hers, something inside both of them shifted. The space between them wasn't filled with awkwardness or hesitation. It was filled with music, with meaning. It wasn't perfect. Her hands weren't as steady as they used to be. His left hand fumbled through a minor transition. She missed a cue. He paused too long on a chord. But the beauty wasn't in perfection. It was in the sound of rediscovery. Every phrase was like a thread being sewn back into place, mending a bond that had frayed but never snapped. Leah added a variation, a new phrase she hadn't planned. Lucas echoed it on the keyboard, building a harmony that felt like it had always been there, just waiting to be heard. Neither of them spoke. There were no words big enough. Their conversation unfolded in measures and melodies. Leah's breath caught as she slid into a passage she had written the day after they were separated, a section full of held notes and dissonance. Lucas responded with gentle counterpoint, not overpowering it, but letting it rise and fall naturally. And then, without cue or plan, they both landed on the same note. Held it, let it ring. Their eyes met. That was when the tears came. Leah kept playing, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Lucas wiped at his eyes, but never missed a beat. Because now, after all this time, the silence was over. They weren't just playing a song, they were writing one together. As the final note faded into the air, neither of them moved right away. Leah let her bow fall gently to her side. Lucas rested his hands in his lap, the weight of everything they had just played settling between them like a third presence in the room. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. She lowered her violin and took a step closer. Her voice, when it came, was soft and shaky. "You remembered the ending," she said. Lucas looked up, his eyes damp but steady. "It just came to me," he replied. "Like I'd been waiting to finish it my whole life." She smiled and nodded, and for a moment neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. The music had said what words couldn't, what no letter could ever express. What 17 years of questions had tried and failed to answer. Leah sat beside him on the bench, not across the room, not halfway across the world, just beside him. He leaned his shoulder gently into hers. She didn't move away. "I used to pretend you were still playing," Lucas said quietly. "I'd sit in my room and imagine I could hear it through the wall, like you were still out there somewhere." "I was," she replied, "and I was hoping you were listening." He glanced at the keyboard, then at the violin in her lap. "Do you think we could write something together? Something new?" Leah blinked, surprised, but only for a second. "Yes," she said. "I think that's exactly what we're supposed to do now." They stood together, slowly putting their instruments away. No rush, no need to explain anything. The moment wasn't about performance or perfection. It was about being in the same room again. Being whole. Leah placed the violin carefully back into its case, then paused. She pulled out a small envelope from the inside pocket. The original note. The one she had written 17 years ago. She handed it to Lucas. He took it in both hands, his thumb brushing over the faded crayon lines. "You wrote this for me?" "I didn't know where else to send it," she said. "But I knew someday it had to be you who found it." Lucas folded the letter gently, then slipped it into his backpack. "I'm not letting it go again," he said. Leah reached for his hand. He let her take it. Outside the music room, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows down the school hallway. But inside, it was warm. Inside, it was full. And though the song was over, something had begun. Something neither of them had to finish alone. The days that followed, their reunion were filled with quiet healing. Leah and Lucas met in the music room almost every afternoon after school. Sometimes they arrived at the same time. Other days, one would already be waiting. It didn't matter. What mattered was the rhythm they found, not just in music but in presence. The simple act of showing up, of being there. They didn't always play. Some days they just sat on the floor and talked. Other times they leaned against the piano in silence, letting the air fill with unspoken thoughts. On the best days they laughed, about things they remembered from before and things they were just discovering about each other now. On the hard days, one or both of them would cry, but no one apologized for it. There was no shame in grief that had waited this long to be released. They started working on a song together, not because anyone asked them to, not because it had to be perfect, but because it felt necessary. Leah brought her old journals, pages filled with scribbled music notations, poems, lyrics she had written when she was a teenager and too scared to hope. Lucas brought his stack of handwritten melodies, some taped together at the edges, some barely legible from where. They spread the papers across the table and the piano bench, like detectives trying to reconstruct a language only they could understand. The first few days were messy. Leah would hum a line, Lucas would play a chord that didn't quite match, and they'd stop, both unsure. But neither of them gave up. They'd laugh, try again, adjust the timing, shift the key. It wasn't about speed, it was about trust. Little by little, the scattered fragments began to form a whole. One afternoon, after they finished refining a section with an unusual bridge Lucas had written years earlier, Leah leaned back and said, "You know what we should call this?" Lucas looked up from the keyboard, a pencil still behind his ear. "What?" She smiled. "For the days we miss." He didn't say anything for a second, but the look in his eyes said enough. "That's exactly what it is," he said quietly. "A song for every birthday, every morning, every bedtime story we never got." From that point on, the name stuck. They wrote slowly, intentionally. They didn't want to rush it. Some days they changed only a single measure. Other days they added 2 pages. The piece grew like a conversation, with pauses, with harmony, with space for silence. And when they reached the final bar, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other and knew. Leah was the one who suggested the idea first. "What if the students performed it?" she asked one afternoon, while cleaning up the music room after another long writing session with Lucas. "We've got a recital coming up in 3 weeks. It could be the final piece." Lucas looked unsure at first. "You think they're ready?" "They don't have to be perfect," Leah said. "They just have to feel it." Lucas thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, let's teach it." The next day, they introduced the piece to Leah's music class. The students, ranging from 10 to 16, were used to simple ensemble exercises. Nothing quite like this, but when Leah played the melody on violin and Lucas followed on keyboard, the room changed. Even the youngest student went still. "What's it called?" one of them asked. Lucas glanced at Leah, then answered softly, "It's called For the Days We Missed." They rehearsed every afternoon for 2 weeks. The students stumbled through the transitions at first, a few struggled with timing, but they kept coming back, asking to try again, determined to get it right. Not for a grade, but because they knew the song mattered. Leah broke the piece into sections. Lucas took time with the pianist, helping them match the dynamics to the emotion. He was gentle but focused, just like Leah remembered him as a child. Patient, steady, quietly encouraging. As the performance neared, Keanu stopped by just once. He stepped into the back of the room during rehearsal, arms folded, listening as the music built from chaos to harmony. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice. He just watched the 2 siblings share something unspoken between each phrase. When the final note rang out and the students looked around nervously for approval, Keanu clapped softly. Lucas looked over. "We still need to polish the middle section," he said. Keanu smiled. "It already says everything it needs to." He left after rehearsal, giving them space to finish their work. And on the night of the recital, the room filled with folding chairs and paper programs, and the little stage at the front of the school felt suddenly bigger than it ever had. Parents, teachers, neighbors, and strangers from the community filed in. The other students played their usual pieces, duets, warm-ups, short exercises. But everyone waited for the final performance, the one simply listed on the program as Original Composition, Student Ensemble. Alan, the school janitor, who had been quietly cleaning the hallway for most of the evening, slipped into the back of the room with his phone. He didn't say a word, he just pressed record. He didn't know exactly what the piece was about, but when the music started, he knew it was important. The students began softly. The first notes of For the Days We Missed echoed through the small auditorium, tentative at first, like a story asking permission to be told. Lucas sat at the keyboard in the back corner of the stage, his hand steady. Leah stood off to the side with her violin resting in her lap, not playing this time, just watching. The melody carried through the room. Each note felt like it had been lived, not just written, not just practiced. It sounded like memory, like apology, like forgiveness wrapped in harmony. Parents wiped away tears before the halfway mark. A teacher clutched the edge of her chair. Even the smallest students in the front row sat wide-eyed, unmoving, sensing something special. And in the back of the room, Alan, the janitor, held his phone perfectly still. He didn't film often, but something told him this needed to be remembered. The song swelled, reaching its peak with a soft piano solo followed by the full ensemble's return. The harmony wasn't perfect, the timing wasn't exact, but it didn't matter. The room wasn't hearing a student performance. It was witnessing a reunion. When the final note faded, there was no applause right away. Just silence. Full, heavy silence. Then someone stood and clapped once. Others followed. Soon, the room was on its feet. Leah turned toward Lucas, who had stood quietly from his bench. They didn't speak. They just smiled. Alan ended the recording, slipped his phone back into his pocket, and quietly left the room. He didn't tell anyone what he'd done, but that night, he uploaded the video with a single caption. The reunion song, written and performed by siblings who found each other through music. No hashtags, no extra tags, just the truth. He sent the link to Keanu. A few hours later, Keanu opened the message while sitting on his back porch. He clicked play and listened as the screen filled with the sight of young musicians pouring their hearts into something they barely understood, but somehow knew deeply. He watched Lucas glance over at Leah. He saw the moment where they realized they didn't have to play alone anymore. He didn't share the video immediately. Instead, he watched it again and again. The next morning, he forwarded the link to Sophia with a note that read, "They finished it." She replied 5 minutes later, "No, they just started something new." By the end of the week, the video had made its way onto music education pages, foster care support groups, and forums for adopted families. It wasn't just a performance anymore. It had become something bigger, a new song, and it was still spreading. 1 week after the recital, Leah arrived early to her classroom, long before the students or other teachers began to fill the halls. The school was quiet, the air still. Sunlight crept in through the blinds in thin, slanted beams. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and just stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence. Her eyes went to the corner where an old bookshelf had sat for years. That morning, she'd finally cleared it out, donated the books, boxed up the extras, and rolled the shelf into storage. In its place stood something new. It wasn't large or elaborate, just a simple glass display case she had found at a local second-hand shop. But once she placed it in the room, it felt right, like it had been waiting for this purpose. Inside the case, resting on a soft velvet lining, sat her violin, the same one she had tucked away all those years ago, strings worn, case scuffed, and filled with a crayon-drawn letter that no one was ever supposed to find. It had come back to her. It had carried her voice through time. It had carried her home. Now, it was going to stay. She had polished it with care, replaced the bridge, tightened the strings. The bow rested across the chin rest, perfectly balanced. Behind it, in a small, clear frame, was a replica of the note she had written at 16. The original was with Lucas, tucked in the pages of his music binder. But this one was for everyone else who might need to read it. Next to the violin sat another framed page, her first letter to Lucas after Keanu found him. The one she had written before she even knew how he would respond. It spoke of hope, of fear, of longing, and music. And just beneath it, attached to the base of the case, was a plaque. Simple, silver, quiet. It read, "This violin found my family. You, may it help others find theirs." Leah read it twice before sitting in the front row of chairs, hands folded in her lap, letting the weight of it all settle around her. She thought about the sound of Lucas's keyboard during their first rehearsal. She thought about the students' faces the night of the recital. She thought about the years she had spent believing no one would ever find what she left behind. But someone did. And now, this violin wouldn't be silent again. It would speak, quietly, wordlessly, to every child who looked at it and thought, maybe someone will find me, too. The violin didn't stay untouched for long. By the end of the first week, a few of Leah's students had noticed the case and lingered after class, quietly studying the display. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. Children always knew when something sacred was in the room. The first letter appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. Leah found it tucked just beneath the edge of the case. Folded into a triangle, written on lined notebook paper, the message simply read, "Dear Dad, I don't know where you are, but I still think about you. Your daughter Maddie." Leah unfolded it slowly, then folded it back the same way and slid it gently under the velvet lining beside her own letter. She didn't mention it to the class, but the next day there were two more. One written in green marker with blocky handwriting. "To my mom, do you ever think about me? I hope you're doing okay. I'm okay now. I just wanted you to know." And another one sealed in an envelope with the outside mark. "To the sister I never met." Leon didn't read them all. Some were meant to stay unopened, but she kept every one safe. Soon, the violin wasn't just an instrument behind glass. It had become something else. A place. A small, silent space for longing to live. By the end of the second week, there were over 20 letters. Notes written in pencil, marker, crayon. Some were messy. Some had drawings. Others were nothing more than a sentence or two, but each one carried the same quiet ache. The kind only time, silence, and unanswered questions could shape. Leah placed a small wooden box beside the case labeled, "If you need to say it." She added a pad of paper and pens. No announcements, no explanation. But the box never sat empty. Lucas visited the classroom one afternoon after school and saw the display for the first time. He stood in front of it without speaking, just staring at the plaque, then at the growing collection of letters inside. He didn't need to ask what it was. Leah joined him and whispered, "I thought the violin had finished its work, but I think it's just started again." Lucas nodded. "It's still carrying messages." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper of his own. He slipped it under the glass. Leah didn't ask what he wrote. But that night, after locking up the classroom, she sat alone with the violin, placed her hand on the top of the case, and whispered, "Thank you." Within a month, word about the violin spread beyond the classroom. Other teachers began stopping by between periods, leaning over the case, reading the plaque, sometimes leaving quietly with misty eyes. A counselor brought in a student who'd recently moved schools due to a family separation. The child didn't speak, but stood in front of the case for 10 minutes, unmoving, before writing a single line on a sticky note and placing it inside the box. "I miss your singing." Lena never told her students who the violin had belonged to. She didn't need to. All they knew was that it had found someone's family. That was enough to give them permission to believe their messages might one day do the same. One afternoon, as the class filed out, a boy lingered near the case. He was quiet, not the type to raise his hand or share much aloud. Leah watched him from her desk as he reached into his backpack and pulled out a letter. He hesitated, then looked over at her. She gave a small nod. He placed the letter inside the wooden box and walked out without saying a word. Leah waited until the hallway was empty before approaching the case. She didn't open the box. She just sat in the front row, beside the growing archive of silent voices, and listened to the stillness. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the last light fell across the music room floor, Keanu stopped by, unannounced. He stood at the door for a moment, watching her through the glass before she waved him in. "I heard," he said, nodding toward the display. Leah smiled gently. "It's becoming something else. Something more." Keanu stepped closer, eyes resting on the violin, the letters, the plaque. "You turned it into a place for stories," he said. She nodded. "A place where nothing has to be perfect, just true." Keanu walked around the case once, slowly. Then he stopped in front of the plaque and read the words aloud. "This violin found my family. May it help others find theirs." He turned to her, voice quieter now. "It already has." She looked at him for a long time. "It feels like it's still playing, even though it's behind glass." Keanu nodded. "Some songs don't end. They just become something you carry." As the room fell into silence again, Leah stepped forward and gently adjusted the bow resting across the violin strings. Not because it needed to be moved, but because it was hers. And because now it belonged to every child who had ever written something they weren't sure anyone would read. The violin had found its final home, but its music was still traveling. Lucas stood backstage, hands tucked into his pockets, shoulders stiff beneath the button-down shirt he'd ironed 3 times that morning. His name was printed in black ink on the program. Lucas Mendez, Original Composition Piano Solo. Beneath it was the title of his piece, Lala's Song. He hadn't told Leah he named it after her. Not directly. She had helped him work through some of the harmonies, but she didn't know what he planned to call it on the competition form. He wanted it to be a surprise, not because he needed the attention, but because she was the reason he was here at all. The auditorium buzzed on the other side of the curtain. Parents, teachers, judges, the occasional cough or shuffle of sheet music, but none of it touched Lucas. Not really. His world had narrowed to the sound of his own heartbeat and the silent question pressing against the inside of his chest. Would she be out there? He hadn't asked her to come. He didn't want to put pressure on the moment. But he'd told her about it. Told her the date, the time, the school. And Leah had nodded and said, "That's a big day." Now, he waited. A stagehand tapped his shoulder. "You're up next." Lucas nodded and stepped forward, his shoes soft against the polished floor. The curtain opened just wide enough for him to pass through. He walked toward the piano at center stage, its black lacquered surface shining under the spotlights. The applause was polite, standard. But just before he sat down, he heard it. A single voice. Sharp, warm, unmistakable. "Go get him, Lucas." He looked toward the second row and found her there. Leah beaming, both hands raised mid-clap, eyes locked on his. He smiled. The world steadied. He took his seat at the piano and placed his fingers gently on the keys. The judges watched, the audience quieted. He took one breath, and then he began. The first note rang out soft and low, barely more than a whisper. Lucas let it hang for a moment before moving to the next. The melody wasn't fast or flashy. It was tender, intentional. A slow unveiling of something he'd carried for as long as he could remember. It wasn't the piece he had written just for the competition. It was the one he had been writing in pieces since he was a child. The one that lived in the back of his head before he even knew her name. The one that hummed through his dreams. The one that filled the silence when he didn't have answers. Now, it had a name, Lala's Song. The room remained still, as if the audience collectively understood they were witnessing more than a performance. Lucas didn't rush. He let the pauses stretch, allowed the quiet to speak between each phrase. He reached the middle section, the part Leah had helped him shape, and gave it more weight, his left hand anchoring the melody while his right whispered its way back into memory. In the fourth row, Leah sat frozen. Her heart had started beating faster the moment he touched the first key, but now it slowed. The music was familiar, yet completely new. She recognized the echo of old lullabies. the tension of their missing years, the warmth of rediscovery. And then came the part she hadn't seen before, a sudden shift in key. A single descending phrase that dipped lower than expected, followed by a delicate lift that felt like a reply. It was new, personal, and as she listened, she understood. This was the part of the song that belonged only to him. The final chorus was softer than the beginning. Lucas ended with two quiet chords spaced far apart, just enough time between them to feel like a question had been asked and answered. When he lifted his fingers from the keys, the silence was electric. Then the room erupted in applause. Leah stood, not out of politeness, but because she couldn't stay seated. Her hands came together fast, heart swelling with pride she couldn't have explained if she tried. Lucas stood and took a modest bow. He glanced at the judges, then scanned the crowd for her again. She didn't wave, she didn't mouth words. She just smiled, the kind of smile that says, "I know." And he smiled back, because she did. After the awards were handed out, Lucas waited in the lobby with his hands tucked into his sleeves. Second place. He held the certificate in one hand, but it didn't feel like the biggest thing he was walking away with. A few other performers came up to congratulate him. One girl asked if his song would be on Spotify someday. He just smiled and thanked them, but his eyes kept drifting toward the auditorium door. Then he saw her. Leah walked through the crowd, moving slowly, as if giving him time to breathe before she reached him. She didn't rush, didn't make a scene. She just moved through the noise until it faded, and only they were left in their little pocket of space. He took a step forward. She didn't speak. He walked right up to her and wrapped his arms around her tightly, face buried in her shoulder. She hugged him back without hesitation. His shoulders trembled just once, not from nerves, but from the release of everything he hadn't known how to say. "I thought I was the only one who remembered," he whispered. Leah pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were wet but steady. "I was just waiting for the music to catch up." He laughed under his breath, that quiet, breathy kind of laugh that only comes after tears. "I named it after you." "I know." They stood together for a long time, right there in the middle of the hallway, surrounded by chatter and ceremony and trophies and noise. But to them, it was all quiet. Lucas held out the certificate, not sure what to do with it. "I don't really care about this," he said. She smiled and took it from him. "Well, I do. Because it means you showed up." He nodded slowly. "I guess we both did." As they walked outside into the early evening light, the world felt wide again, but not in the overwhelming way it used to, more like a canvas, something waiting. "I've been thinking," Lucas said as they approached the parking lot. "What if we wrote another one? Something we both perform." "You mean together?" He nodded. "You on violin, me on piano. Not for school, just for us." Leah smiled. "Then let's make space for it." They paused by her car. The wind blew gently through the trees lining the street. "Do you think it'll always feel this new?" Lucas asked. "No," she said, "but I think it'll always feel like us." He opened the passenger door without asking. She didn't stop him. And as they drove away from the competition, the certificate tucked quietly into the glove box, Lucas turned to her and said, "Next time I want to play your part too." She laughed. "Then we'll write one where we switch." And just like that, they were writing again. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, folded neatly in a cream-colored envelope, addressed in soft handwriting that Keanu recognized immediately. He found it waiting on his desk when he returned from a meeting at the Foundation's Community Outreach Center. There was no return address, just a single word in the top left corner. "Leah." He sat down, cleared the clutter from his desk, and opened it slowly, careful not to tear the edges. Inside was a 2-page letter, handwritten in blue ink. The paper smelled faintly of lavender. "Dear Keanu, I don't know how to start this except by saying thank you." Not just for finding the violin, not just for carrying the letters, but for seeing something that most people would have passed by. I think about that a lot, how close I was to never knowing the truth. How many times I almost gave up on the idea that someone could find me or him. But you did. You didn't have to stop in that thrift store. You didn't have to ask questions, but you did. And because of that, I found my brother. I found myself again, too. Keanu leaned back, his eyes following each word slowly, letting them land. I've watched Lucas become someone I always knew he was meant to be. He's still quiet, still careful, but he's also bold now. He's writing music with his whole heart, and every time I hear him play, I know that something sacred was rescued from being lost forever. I don't think I would have found him without you, or without that violin. And the truth is, I didn't just leave a message in that case. I left a piece of myself. I left hope that someone, someday, would care enough to open something broken and look inside. She had underlined those last 5 words. Open something broken and look inside. Keanu stared at the phrase for a long time before reading the rest. I've placed the violin in a case at the front of my classroom now. Kids leave letters in it, messages for people they've lost. It's become more than just an instrument. It's become a space for memory and forgiveness and healing. You gave us that space. Thank you for not walking past it. Thank you for letting music carry what words couldn't. With all my heart, whip it away. Keanu folded the letter slowly, then opened his bottom desk drawer. He reached into a manila folder labeled Unfinished Songs, filled with scraps of notes, thank you letters, and sketches from the children and families they'd helped over the years. He slid Leah's letter inside, near the top. But he didn't close the drawer just yet. He pulled out a blank card from his drawer instead and picked up his pen. Keanu sat quietly for a few minutes, the blank card resting on his desk, his pen hovering just above it. He wasn't one for long replies. He believed in brevity when the moment asked for depth. And this moment didn't need paragraphs. It needed truth. He thought about the violin, the way it had waited silently behind those stacked toys. He thought about Leah's handwriting in crayon, the folded note full of fear and love. He thought about Lucas's music and the look in his eyes when he first said her name aloud. Then he wrote, "Dear Leah." Sometimes the smallest sound carries the biggest message. Thank you for trusting me to hear yours. Keanu. He signed it, slid the card into an envelope and sealed it. There was no address to mail it to. Instead, he placed it inside the same folder he'd tucked her letter into, Unfinished Songs. It didn't need to travel. It had already arrived where it belonged. Later that evening, as he prepared to leave the office, he opened the folder one last time. Inside were dozens of moments. A drawing from a girl who had reunited with her biological sister after 15 years. A photo of 2 brothers holding matching stuffed animals they thought were lost in separate foster homes. A letter from a mother who had found her child through a shared lullaby posted on the Foundation's website. And now, Leah's words. Keanu pressed the folder shut gently, then slid it into the safe behind his desk. He didn't need to display them. He didn't need recognition. He just wanted to keep them safe. Messages once forgotten, now found. Before leaving, he walked through the Foundation's lobby. The framed display still hung near the front desk. The original letter Leah had written at 16, the one that had been crumpled behind a violin and left for someone brave enough to care. Beneath it, the plaque read, "To the message that finally got through." Keanu paused in front of it, remembering the weight of the moment he had first read it. The childlike handwriting, the plea buried in simplicity, and the way it had rippled into something bigger than he ever expected. A young woman in the lobby noticed him standing there. "Is that real?" she asked. He nodded. "It is." She stared at the letter a moment longer. "Did it work?" He looked at her with quiet certainty. "Yes," he said. It found who it was meant to find. Then he turned, stepped out into the evening, and let the door swing gently closed behind him. The next morning, Keanu returned to his routine, but something about the air felt different. Maybe it was the sun rising a little warmer through the windows. Maybe it was just the weight that had finally lifted. A story long waiting for an ending that no longer felt unfinished. At his desk, he pulled out the folder labeled Unfinished Songs one more time. Not to add anything, not to read, just to hold it for a moment. He thought about how many stories start small. A letter, a melody, a memory someone was too afraid to say aloud. And yet somehow, those were always the things that traveled the farthest. He placed the folder back into its drawer, locked it, and smiled. That chapter was closed. Not forgotten, just carried differently now. Later that week, he received a message from Sophia. She'd visited the school in San Diego and sent him a photo. It showed the violin case in Leah's classroom, now surrounded by a few new drawings taped to the glass. Small hands had traced hearts, written notes, drawn stars. One letter simply read, "Dear somebody, I hope you come back soon." Sophia's text read, "Geez, he's building something that will outlast all of us." Keanu saved the photo to his phone and stared at it for a long moment. There were 100 reasons he could have missed that violin in the thrift store, 100 ways it might have stayed hidden. But he'd been there, at that exact moment, in that exact place. And someone, somewhere, had trusted the silence enough to leave behind something that mattered. He walked out of his office, down to the Foundation's media team, and handed them the note Leah had sent. "I want this archived," he said. "Make sure we never lose it." They scanned it, digitized it, added it to the internal archive, labeled Artifacts of Hope. On his way back upstairs, Keanu stopped in the hallway outside the recording studio. A group of children were rehearsing, voices rising and falling in harmony, guided by a patient instructor tapping a pencil against her clipboard. He stood and listened for a minute, then smiled and walked on. Back in his office, he opened his laptop and typed out one line on the Foundation's social feed. "Sometimes the smallest sound carries the biggest message. Never stop listening." He hit post. And across the country, in a music classroom filled with letters and sunlight, a girl picked up a violin for the first time. She didn't know where it had come from. She didn't know the full story behind the case or the plaque. But she knew one thing: she wasn't alone. And that was enough. Not all instruments are meant to stay in tune. Some are left behind, forgotten, broken. But even those hold echoes. A scratch in the wood, a name carved inside a case, a sticker faded by time. Sometimes what they carry is heavier than any melody, because it's not just sound they hold, it's memory. And sometimes all it takes is one note to bring a family home. Lee's violin was never about perfect performance. It was about waiting, hoping, holding something no one else could see until the right person came along. Lucas never heard her voice after the day they were separated, but somehow he still remembered her song. Not just the notes, but the feeling, the safety, the love. And when they met again, neither had to explain it, because the music had kept speaking for them. The violin now rests in a case, but it hasn't gone quiet. It inspires children who don't yet have the words. It catches the attention of those who walk by with something unspoken inside. It invites people to leave pieces of themselves behind, just like Leah did. A letter, a sketch, a phrase they're not ready to say out loud. It doesn't promise answers, but it offers something just as important: belonging. The story didn't end when Leah found her brother. It grew. Through the notes they now write together. Through the music their students carry forward. Through a single violin, cracked and imperfect, that traveled far enough to connect two hearts across time. There are stories hidden in everyday places. A note behind a bookshelf. A melody on a dusty cassette. A name written in crayon on the back of a forgotten photo. We pass them every day without knowing. But once in a while, someone stops. Someone listens. That's when the story finds its way forward. Keanu didn't just find a violin. He found a message waiting to be heard. And he didn't have to understand every detail to know it mattered. He simply followed where it led. From a letter left behind to a brother who never stopped humming her tune. From a classroom of silence to a music room full of hope. From loss to reunion. If you've ever found something small that led to something big, a photograph, a memory, a message someone left behind, we want to hear about it. Have you ever found something that led to something bigger? Share your incredible story below. You never know who it might help find their own. And if you've made it this far, thank you. Your time matters. Your attention matters. Because stories like this don't travel alone. They live on in the people who carry them forward. Next time, we'll tell you about a woman who's been sitting on the same bench every Tuesday for 25 years. She's not waiting for a ride, she's waiting for a promise. A promise her son made before disappearing into the silence of addiction and recovery. All she has left is a fading photo, a name, and the bench where she last saw him. What Keanu uncovers during that search will break your heart and restore your hope. Until then, listen closely. The smallest sound can carry the biggest message. And sometimes, the right note is all it takes to bring someone home.